I wasn't going to film this because I didn't want the Land Rover to be another project, but this kind of shows why some of the things on the Riley take me so long. It's because I've got all these other things I need to do as well. This is the headliner out of the Discovery. So I've been trying to figure out where it leaks from. They're well known for leaking around the sunroofs, and mine obviously I've had it sitting outside because I wanted the space to do the woodworking, and we've had some really bad weather lately and it got soaked inside. It absolutely got full of water, and I'm still trying to figure out where it gets in. The drains around the sunroof are all clear. They're not blocked, but they're not perfectly clean, but I can clean those out. Water does drain down them. So I haven't exactly figured out where that's happening from. I'm actually waiting for it to rain again so I can go and have a look at it in a downpour to actually see where the water's dripping in. But this is the headliner. This had all just completely come apart. So there's the remains of the cloth down there. And they use a foam back cloth, and over the years the foam, as this stuff, just completely disintegrates. So what I'm going to do is, got a cheap brush, you just get all the old foam off, and then you can just glue on a new headliner. Now you'd think that would be simple, but again I'm hit by the problem that it's just getting really difficult to buy stuff in New Zealand. There are headliner kits online that you can buy, that's pretty easy, but they're only 150 centimeters wide, and that's not wide enough for this. This needs to be about 165, I think it's 64 inches wide. And I can probably ring around some of the suppliers, but again, they're supplying commercial amounts, so you have to buy rolls of it and stuff like that. So I've been figuring out what can I do as an alternative. What some people do is they just paint this. They clean all the old foam off and then they paint this with texture paint. I don't really want to do that. So I'm actually going to try polar fleece, because this doesn't have to be a perfect car, it just needs to look a little bit tidier. I'm going to have to experiment to see if the glue soaks through the polar fleece, but if it doesn't, I think that'll work quite well because it's very stretchy and you can get it around all these curves. It's just a neutral bland grey colour, which is what this was to start with. That's down there. And it's just an easy and cheap alternative. So, of course, the other thing is I could take this into a car upholstery place, but now I've got the problem of how do you get it there, because I can't put it in the back of the Land Rover because it's too long. I'd have to sort of temporarily stick it back into the ceiling to be able to move it. So I'm going to give that a try. If it doesn't work, of course, you can peel it all off and try again. I don't think the glue sticks that well that it's glued. Once it's glued, it's on there permanently. So that's the plan. But I need to finish just scraping all of this old foam off. And like I say, it's actually pretty easy. Vacuuming it up. The good thing is it means I can clean up all of the plastic parts. This is the fleece I'm going to use. I should probably iron that first. But if the glue doesn't soak through that, that should stick onto that backing no trouble. And it's synthetic fleece, of course, so water's not going to worry it too much. And that will just be a good bland, neutral sort of headliner. And I know you can get headlining from different suppliers, but again, I'm in New Zealand, so you know, you can order a headliner from any number of places in the UK, a proper kit, but getting it shipped out here is just ridiculously expensive. And this is the pile of all the bits that came out that you have to remove to get the headliner out, and these are filthy. So while everything is out, I can give everything a really good clean. There's sort of sand and dust and bits and pieces everywhere, so it's not too hard to get it apart. The other good thing I can do is, these really annoyed me, the sort of little cloth thing. This one was sagging. You can see I've pulled it to tighten it because the elastic goes, or if it's had something sitting heavy in it, it stretches and it stays stretched. So the good thing about taking those off, which you can only do with the headliner down, is I can reposition this. I can tighten these up again and make them look nice again. So that's the plan with the Land Rover. And also, of course, I'm working on the bike. So the tank for that think I've mentioned I've been cleaning that up. I tried to get as much of the dents out of here as possible. I'm just going to fair over it with filler, basically, to make it look a little bit tidier. Doesn't have to be perfect. That's the thing. You can sort of see where I TIG brazed up where all the rusty bits were, and I've sealed the whole thing with the red coat sealer, which you can't see because it's inside there, and that holds water now. I haven't put fuel in it, but I'm pretty sure that should be secure now. And I've got a bunch of cardboard boxes here because I'm going to cut a template for making the piece of plywood that goes on the firewall here. But obviously I don't want to actually screw that in place. I'm probably going to bolt it in place because it needs to be removable, because when I do the skin on the car, that has to wrap around here. So I can't put that firewall piece on yet. You also cut it slightly smaller, so you've got the skin on here and it sits down a little bit so that the bonnet sits flush with the body. So I need to work out all those dimensions before I can do that anyway. The other thing I need to do, of course, is trim this down. So this is flat at the moment. It actually needs to be angled a little bit to match the line of the body. So what I will do is I'll mark a line along the face here. It's a changing line. Obviously it varies a bit, so you can see at the top here it doesn't need to come down much at all. It's pretty much flat. And then I'll need to sort of fair all of this in. That's kind of where I'm at with various projects. Apart from looking like I've lined it with Muppet skin, it hasn't come out too badly. The polar fleece stuff stretches pretty well, so you can get it into all of the corners pretty easily. Obviously it's kind of a brush type finish, which is why it's looking all different at the moment, because I've been going through and rubbing it quite hard with my hands, and I'm pretty sure the glue is going to hold. I think I've got most of the creases out of it. The glue I'm using is this ADOS spray adhesive, and it gives you a couple of minutes of work time, which you absolutely need, because it's really hard to manhandle such a big piece of fabric without it getting stuck to itself and getting stuck to you and getting stuck to everything else. So that, I think it's about 3 or 4 minutes of extra time you get. You can actually peel it up, stretch it a bit and reposition it, and it sticks down fine. And obviously there's the holes to be cut for the sunroofs, and then there's trim, and then there's the little cargo nets that all get bolted back on, and that'll help hold it in place, I think. So that glue is supposed to be waterproof. We'll see how it goes. I'll probably just leave it now for 24 hours to dry, which is how long it says it takes, and then I can flip it over and trim it. The reason I'm doing this now and not working on the car is because I'm using the plywood. You can see I've got a second sheet of it there, which I'm going to make it the firewall out of. I'm using that on top of my trestles to have a big enough flat area to be able to do this. So that worked out to be quite handy. So I'm currently in the back of the Land Rover, and it is raining, not very hard, but I'm sort of sitting in here actually with a little cup of tea, hoping the rain gets heavier so I can see where the water's getting in. These are the sunroofs inside the Landy, and I'm wondering if it's actually the outer seal of this rear sunroof that's leaked, because the screws are a bit rusty. And I've cleaned all this up. I cleaned out all the channels, I've lubricated everything. They actually work pretty well, and as far as I can see they're sealing okay. These are the overflow drains. So what happens is, this is all metal and these are plastic bits, and you can see they're sort of siliconed in. I'm guessing that's factory. And then these hoses are meant to drain any excess out. Those are definitely free as far as I can tell. The front ones definitely are, because I've poured water through them. And I'm not actually sure about the rear ones, but you have to be very careful you don't break these off. But so far there's no water leaking, which is interesting, apart from one place here, and that is because the edge of the Alpine windows has actually rusted, and it's rusted through, so there is water getting in there. I should be able to fix that easily enough, and obviously I have to do all of that with the sunroof, with the headlining out. So I'm going to leave the headlining out for now, and then basically you pop this glass out, and then I should be able to pull out these seals and fix that rust, hopefully. But you can see I've cleaned up a bit, but the mess the headlining left, this foam that just comes off everywhere, it's pretty horrible stuff. But yeah, so far I haven't seen any leaks. I don't see any around the front either. So what I was hoping is you would be able to see exactly where the water has been leaking in, been pouring in. No, it's quite dry. And what tended to happen is the water would get in, it would obviously leak down the roof somewhere into this channel, and you'd be driving along, and then as soon as you put the brakes on and the front of the car dipped, all the water would rush forwards and down the A-pillars, and then drip out onto the floor. But no, interestingly, so far there's nothing. Yeah, as I say, I might need to wait until it actually starts really bucketing down. I actually forgot, I don't need to sit on the floor because we have these little jump seats, which are quite funny. But yeah, I think I just saw some drips of water there. That can't explain where most of the water's getting in though, because that's far too low down. I'm sure it was coming in through the sunroof. I did end up adjusting the glass on, I think it was the front sunroof. I think the mechanism there is a little bit broken. So when I bought the car, the handles were off it, because they did say it did leak. So they didn't try to hide that fact, and I kind of expected it anyway. It's a known weakness on these things. But now I've lubricated it all, cleaned it up, cleaned all the seals, I can't see where it's leaking at the moment. This is turning into a strange little video with all sorts of little bits and pieces going on. This is the headliner, just with the polar fleece, and I've started putting some of the trim back in, and these fit through with little plastic pegs, very prone to breaking off. One of them's already broken off on here, and there are little metal plates that go on here, so let's see, these are all the other parts that I took the opportunity to scrub them clean. They were pretty filthy, but they've actually come up okay. One thing I really hate about modern cars is how they're all held together with these stupid little plastic clips and bits and pieces, which, unless you know exactly how it comes apart, it's easy to break them. I didn't break these were already broken. These have obviously been off before. And you can see there's just a thin piece of plastic, and then the clip that goes into the hole in the body, and those just break. So don't know the best way to fix that. You can't glue these things, I've tried, it just doesn't work. Maybe Velcro dots or something, it just needs to stop it flapping around. But these are the little metal pieces, and since they're a little bit rusty, they're still a little bit rusty, I missed an edge. I just gave them a quick coat of paint, and then I used my little toaster oven here just to bake the paint on. This piece of aluminium that they're resting on is actually one of my little practice pieces on the English wheel, putting a dome in a panel, and I find it works really well for sitting parts on to dry the paint, because if you just sit them flat it can sometimes stick, but because this has got a curve in it, it means the pieces sit just on the edges, on the corners, and it bakes the paint on really well. It's a bit annoying I've missed an edge there. I'll probably just rub some oil on it or something before I put it back in. But these little metal pieces fit over those pins, and then there's little little metal nuts that screw on over those. Sounds like the rain's getting a bit heavier, so I might go outside again. This is how the headlining looks on the inside. I've started attaching some of the trim. I was able to fix the loose elastic a bit. I really hate the clips that hold those things on. They're sort of little plastic pillars with nuts that thread on them, and I'm pretty sure they're only designed to be used once, so you know, use it once, throw it away sort of thing. But I mean, this will be fine. It looks okay. It definitely looks a lot better than the old sagging headliner with foam coming off everywhere. Whether or not it's going to stand up over time, I don't know, but it's just kind of it's not a project car, and it's not a restoration. Let's just try and make it a little bit neater than it was and make it usable and functional. So I think that's all I can do on this at the moment, really. There's still a few little holes and things to cut up the top here where the front trim goes in, but that has to go in after the headliner. So the headliner goes in. These bits have to go on first because they're attached from behind, then the headliner goes in, and then you attach that top console and the things like the mirrors and stuff like that. There's holes in here I have to punch through somewhere. You can sort of feel them. There's one there. So when it all goes back in the car, I just need to make sure all those holes are punched. And around here there's the sort of seal that goes in around there, so I might need to trim this a little bit more, and that all goes in once the headliner's in the car, because that seal covers this edge, but it also clips around the metal edge around the sunroof, so that's what holds all of the middle of this up. But it's not too bad. I got a couple of small wrinkles in it, one at the back there, there's one over here, there's just there. But it's kind of the nature of this polar fleece fabric that you get marks on it anyway, depending which way you sort of rub it. So gives it a bit of texture. Yeah, I'm not. I think that's come out reasonably well for a cheap job. So the good thing is there were sales on, and the polar fleece was 50% off. So I think I paid 50 bucks New Zealand for the fleece, and 2 cans of glue, and they were $25 each, so $100 to do the job. I think that's worth it. So this one's now ready to put away until I can actually repair the car around the Alpine windows and then put this back in. But I've gone ahead and made all the holes for all the different bits of trim and things fit in. So you can sort of see how it all goes back together, and I think this should actually look okay. I mean, it's going to look fine, it's just whether or not it's going to hold up once it's in the car. But all I can do is try it and see. So put this aside now. I need to see if I've got another big tarpaulin I can put over that, because what I want to do next on the car is cut the pieces of timber that go in the sides there. I've got some bits of wood, I just need to trim them down, and with my bandsaw right there, I don't want sawdust going all over the nice headlining I've just put in. So I'll see if I can cover that up. I've got plenty of old sheets and bits and pieces around that I can use. And I've also been playing with how I'm going to cut this, put the sort of taper, I guess you call it, or the shape on these pillars. So I dug out my spoke shave, and I've been playing with that, and that actually works reasonably well. So that will let me do things like along here. I'm hoping I can take most of that down with a with a hand plane first, and then also similar on this edge here, because you can see at the moment this is square, but it needs to be on an angle. But what I want to do is get the little side pieces in first, get those all actually fixed in place, make this as strong as possible, and then I can actually shape it. I also still have to make the firewall, but of course it occurred to me I can't put the firewall on yet, because when I make the aluminium skin, it has to wrap around the frame. So the skin will be wrapped around the frame, and then I think what I'm going to do is bolt the firewall onto that. So it'll sort of clamp everything together. I will actually use through bolts on the firewall, just in case I ever need to take it off. But that's effectively a piece of plywood cut to follow this. Some of them, they don't seem to go all the way down to the bottom. Probably will just take mine all the way to the base. And then obviously there's it comes up sort of like almost like a horseshoe shape. So it comes in here somewhere. Obviously you need room under here to put your feet and that kind of stuff. Space for the pedals. Space for the steering column. But what that will do is it's not flush with this. So you have to imagine you've got a 1.6 millimeter layer of aluminium coming over here, wrapping down. Then there's kind of a rubber seal, and then you want the bonnet to sit flush with the aluminium. So the edge of the plywood will be set in a little bit to give me that lip, which is where the rear of the bonnet rests. In terms of the skinning, obviously I just mentioned I'm going to use aluminium. The Brooklyns, the bodies like this were originally steel, but aluminium's what I've got a little bit of experience on with my Austin 7 there, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to end up using H5005 aluminium because that's what we can get in New Zealand. I did look at getting some 1100 aluminium sheet and nobody has it. So the problem in New Zealand, of course, apparently also the mills have changed recently, and now if they're bringing in that sort of thing, they kind of have to bring in a ton of it. So, and if nobody's using it, nobody brings it in, and there isn't any available. 5005 is easy to get. Like I say, that's what we used on the Austin 7. That worked fine. That's what I'm going to use on this. As I mentioned, it's raining today quite a bit. Good for looking for leaks in the Landy. But I'm also doing all sorts of other little bits and pieces. Those are actually for the garden. People in New Zealand will recognise what those are, probably just from the shape. But it's a project I'm still working on. The little bike, of course, I'm working on as well. So this is the tank. I have beaten out as many of the dents as I could. I've cleaned it up, and I've put a first layer of metal filler. So again, I'm not trying to make something perfect. I'm just trying to make something usable that doesn't look too terrible. So this is Metal Tech filler. It's kind of body filler with, I think it's strands of stainless steel or something silly like that in it. So it's not smooth like body filler, but it'll work really well to fill out all the big dents and things. I can sand this down and get the shape pretty good. The tank's definitely sealed with the red coat. I know it doesn't leak. Yesterday I wire brushed it all down to get rid of any surface rust and gave it a wipe with phosphoric acid solution, and it didn't really flash rust overnight, so that's actually done the trick. There's a little bit of the white phosphate powder on there that I just kind of cleaned off before I applied the filler. It's going to need quite a bit. There'll be a couple of layers on here, but that'll get rid of the worst of the dents, especially around the back here. I can sand this to shape. Still a dent there. It's really pouring down now, so I think I'm going to go out and have another look inside the back of the Landy. But yeah, this is another little thing I'm working on this weekend. It's been a funny day, what with the weather and all the little bits and pieces I've been doing. Actually looks like Yeah, I think the rain stopped now. Oh, my gimbal's a bit crooked. The Land Rover is still outside. It hasn't actually leaked. It's been raining pretty much all day and it's fine. So I don't know where the water's getting in. May just be when there's really, really heavy rain. I've turned it around because there's a slight slope on the driveway, so I wanted to see if it was something to do with the direction that it comes from. The tank has been covered in filler. That all needs sanding, but it's getting fairly late now and I'm sick of sanding because I have been working on the body again. I fitted the vertical, the door pillars. You can see pretty clearly now how they're offset and how the passenger side door is a lot shorter than the driver's side door. My method of using basically a flat piece of board, sliding it in, like cutting it to the right height, then sliding it in and then tracing the outlines on it worked really well. That was much easier than trying to cut a piece and fit it in. So for example, these are the templates I used. When I had the board in there, I would just use these to trace around the lines where it needs to go. And you can sort of see, maybe tilt it up a bit. I made them much, much thicker at the top, just because I'm screwing into end grain there and it's not going to be so strong. There'll be brackets and things. Simple butt joint at the bottom with a couple of screws. I've made sure that the screws are off to the sides because this is also probably going to have brackets that go in here that get bolted through. I have also started shaping things, so this is why I'm sick of sanding. I used the plane to get a lot of it off, and then I used my belt grinder, which worked really well. I did have to be careful. There was dust everywhere, of course, so I had dust cloths on top of things, and one of the dust cloths got caught into the belt grinder, which sort of the belt sander, which stopped it pretty much dead immediately. So I had to stop and pull all of that apart to clean it up. I still haven't actually done the shaping on the front yet. That'll be the next job. But you can sort of see now the shape of it. I also just did a piece of cardboard to represent where the firewall is going to go, just so I could see pretty much how much clearance I need to clear the steering column and things like that. Obviously things like the temperature sender and some of the cabling and things will end up going through there. In the car there is actually kind of a shelf that comes out here, it comes out and then down. I'm not sure whereabouts, to sort of here somewhere, about the back of the engine. But that's good because that gives you a place up here where you can mount the SU fuel pump and the fuel filter and things like that. So as you can see, I did start shaping it. This is all curved to fit. I did shape this one, so this one has a slight curve on it. I got a bit carried away with the old sander there, took a bit of the primer off the chassis. It's still pretty rough, it needs a bit more on there, but you can see this is actually pretty solid now. It's flexible, but solid. So cars like this are meant to flex. They will bend. That's why they used ash, because it's kind of a bendy timber. But with it like that, I was able to figure out that yes, I can actually get in the car. You have to be quite bendy to get your legs in and through and onto the pedals. But it also let me verify that the shape is more or less correct. So this is where the door would go, kind of in there like that. This door is a little bit bent up, so I'm going to make a door to fit, basically. I may have made one mistake, which is I've made it about 1/4 of an inch too low. This cross member, which basically means my door will be 1/4 of an inch shorter than a proper one. I don't think anyone's going to notice that though. And you can really see the sort of barrel shape in the body now. The way I get these curves correct is I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this with one hand, but you basically take something like a steel rule and you can bend it to the shape, and you can make sure there are no high spots or low spots. And the other thing that's important to note is the aluminium doesn't actually touch these, or it doesn't have to. In fact, you probably don't want it to, because anywhere it touches you could end up with a ridge in the metal. So these are just here to provide the frame. The aluminium skin will be shaped, and then it actually gets wrapped around the front and the back of the frame. So this is the front of the frame, obviously, and then the back. So you're not trying to make the aluminium touch the timber. If anything, you want it slightly lower than it, and then I may end up putting some felt or some rubber or something like that, just to give a little bit of support underneath the aluminium skin. But I think, so the next thing to do is, of course, shape the front. I still haven't done that. This is where you need the ruler to show you. You can see it's going to be flat there, but down somewhere along the side, I can't do it with one hand, but when you curve it there, if you try to sit the ruler across there, it sits high on that front edge, and you can sort of see the gap, so you know more or less how much you have to take off. So what I'm going to do is draw a pencil line on the front face, and I'll use that as my guide to sort of sand down to. The wood planes that I've got that I restored work really well. I'm glad I spent the time to rebuild that number 5 plane, because that's what I used to take the bulk of this out, which is why there's a, it's only some of them, but the wood shavings there. And now that you start getting some frame, you can start doing things like laying bits of cardboard on it and sort of taping them down and starting to see what the shape's going to look like, and where you're actually going to have to put the shape in the aluminium in the panels, so that everything fits. So this starts giving you an idea of what the body's going to look like. It did make a hell of a mess absolutely everywhere. There was sawdust everywhere. I've used my compressed air to blow all of that around, out of the way, and then vacuumed everything up. But it's slowly starting to look like a car. So the question is now, should I start doing the door frames, or should I start on the rear part of it? I think I might start on the door frames, because I've got lots of little pieces of timber left over, which are going to be big enough to make some of the bits of the door. So I may as well use those up. But it's slowly coming together. Again, you really do have to think carefully about how you're going to assemble everything, and where all the screws need to go, to make sure that they're not going to get in the way of any of the sort of bracketry that goes in there, which will be something I have to actually start thinking about soon. And there'll be a few little pieces to tidy up, sort of these little bits that are sort of sticking out. Although, to be honest, I might just leave them like that. It seems like the sort of thing they would do at the factory. They wouldn't worry about that because it's not visible. You can't see it. Same with the square edges under here. I don't know that they would bother to sort of shave that down. I might, just so it looks a bit neater. But again, you don't see any of that. That's all up underneath the scuttle. The instrument panel goes sort of in here somewhere, so hopefully there's enough room for all of that. It's all pretty tight. I mean, it's a very small car, so that's kind of what you expect. But yeah, I'm pleased with how that's come out. I did find a large tarpaulin to put over the top of all the Land Rover parts, because I didn't want to get sawdust into that polar fleece. But it's quite nice actually seeing the shape of it starting to come out now in the timber work in the frame. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but then I'm not sure any of the originals are 100% accurate to each other. I think they all vary a lot, so should be close enough. I'm sat in the car, and I can't do this with the gimbal, there's not enough room. You can see I'm stuck under the brake. There's plenty of room there for the pedals. Well, I wouldn't say plenty. There is some room there for the pedals. I may need to shave a little bit off that frame. And you can also, if I can hold it in place, sort of see how the door fits in like that. Now the problem with this is the latch goes down in that corner, but obviously there's not much room. So this will be the door, and I'm sort of sat right up next to it. So you can't really get a door handle here. So what they seem to use on the Brooklyns was a remote door handle. So the latch is still down here, of course, but the handle's up here somewhere. So it's kind of up out of the way. I can buy those from the UK. I'm also going to have to buy the hinges that go on the pillar here for the door. And again, this is stuff that's not cheap. I think those door latches are about 180 quid each, something like that. And the hinges are about £30 each. So obviously I need 4 hinges and 2 of those latches. But there isn't really much choice there. I don't know how else you could do it and have it all correct without those parts. But yeah, it is slowly coming together. Oh. There's still no leaks.